Hello, I'm Matt Kelly.
And I'm Matt Dancona.
And this is the Two Matts for the week ending Friday, the 6th of October. Matt, what did we talk about this week?
Well, the first half we talked about Rishi Sunak and his attempts to upgrade himself as C3PM, and we're looking forward to how that goes. So we kicked that about. And then I have to say, I think we got on to... I think we moved up a gear this week, actually.
I think we should consider changing the whole bloody format, to be honest.
We got into really deep philosophical waters about sharks,
electrocution,
and
death row,
AI.
Yeah.
It was an astonishing. It was a very deep. Honestly, it was a landmark podcast episode.
Do you think we should go into the? We might get higher up in the chart if we were in the philosophy category as well.
I think we might get into the philosophy game.
So much competition in the news podcast game now. We're going to shift to
the two philosophers. Yeah. No, we obviously have a talent. I think, as listeners are about to discover, it's our métier.
That's it. Okay, so it's great fun, and I hope you enjoy it, folks. So this is the Two Matts, episode 16.
Called?
What are we going to call it?
Either the shark episode or...
yeah, the one with the shark.
The one with the shark.
The one with the shark.
Love it. Enjoy.
So, Matt, what are we going to talk about this week?
Well, I think inescapably we have to talk about Rishi Sunak, the change maker, the fire starter, who in Manchester promised a complete upgrade of the Tory party, and by implication that, well, thank God, a grateful nation takes the knee. Thank you, Rishi. But for those listeners lucky enough to have escaped this, we're now going to inflict a quick clip of the Prime Minister. Sorry about this.
All right.
Okay, so that gives you an idea of what he was saying, which is he's running as a change candidate in the coming election, which is mad. Obviously very difficult if you represent the party that's been in power for 13 years.
So let's pause there for a second, because that is the narrative everybody has been saying. But what's the counter-narrative that someone's telling him this? Why does this make sense?
Well, I did some calls after the speech just because it was so ludicrous, it seemed to me. You know, he's been a minister since 2018, right? And Prime Minister for nearly a year, and he's at the tail end, it would appear, of a long Tory era that started in 2010. How can you possibly persuade anyone that you're the change candidate? And the argument that came back was interesting, if not entirely watertight, which is that their polls, they say, you always have to be a bit health warning on this. Their polls say that Sunak is polling ahead of the Tory party, which I imagine is not very hard.
Yeah.
I mean, lettuces may be polling ahead of the Tory party right now. Yeah. However, so they want a presidential-style campaign. And they think, and I'm not sure this is correct, but they think that Sunak versus Starmer, as opposed to Labour versus Tories, gives them a shot. Yeah,
well, that as a former betting person, you can see the odds certainly being more favourable for a Sunak versus Starmer shoot-off versus, because Labour have consistently polled, 20 points ahead of the Tories now for quite a long time, haven't they?
It is interesting that there was, his wife gave a very gracious introduction to her before he spoke, and she referred to his youth. That was no accident.
Yeah.
Sunak is still very young. He's 43.
Yeah.
Versus Keir Starmer, who's 61.
Do you know what? You just saying that, obviously, I listen to these things as a punter quite often as well, and it's only just dawned on me, foolishly, that was a play. And because when she said, I can hardly call him young anymore for a man in his 40s, I, of course, thought, well, of course he's still young.
Yeah.
And so,
that's a correct response.
I was being cleverly...
So what they'll do is they'll play on Starmer as a sort of representative. There was a very interesting phrase in the speech, which didn't get picked up. Sunak referred to the permanent state, which is pure American MAGA. It's just one north of deep state.
Yeah.
And I think they'll present Starmer, which is correct factually, as the former Director of Public Prosecutions, as someone who is steeped in the kind of what this new 30-year consensus that Sunak claims to be trying to defeat.
What talk to me? You in your fantastic New European hot take yesterday. You brought this up about what happened. 30 years ago?
I'm baffled because 30 years ago is 1993, which sort of gets you into early Britpop. It's the year.
So he's like 14.
13. He goes to Winchester College in that year.
Yeah.
But he acts as if he and the whole nation suddenly suffered a great trauma in 1993. And ever since then, it's 30 years of hurt, isn't it?
Yeah.
I can't really understand why 30. I mean, obviously, he wanted to incorporate Labour so that he wasn't just rebelling against his own fellow Conservatives.
I misheard him at first and thought he said 13. Yeah, which of course would make absolute sense.
That would make absolute sense.
Because that's the length of the Tory.
He was trying to imply, but he goes back to John Major, which is bizarre.
Yeah.
John Major's already been in power in 93 for 3 years.
Yeah.
And that is the date when it all started to go wrong, apparently, which is strange. And I can't offer any more analysis than that because I think it was just a figure plucked from the air to bring in Labour, the 13 years of Labour.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the problem he's got is there are manifold problems, but in a way, stepping back, the biggest is that there is this huge problem which Gordon Brown faced in 2007, which is how do you renew an office? It's really hard. I mean, renewing an opposition is hard enough, but when you're in office, it's really difficult.
Yeah.
And David Miliband and Gordon Brown sort of fought this barely concealed feud when Miliband was Foreign Secretary in the Brown administration over who was best placed to be the incarnation of renewal of office in office, and it didn't work. They lost in 2010. So Sunak it's a very big ask, and I personally don't think that he, in any way, shape, or form, looks like or sounds like a change candidate.
No.
I mean, the message he was bringing in Manchester was quite thin, really. I mean, the main element in it was we're not going to do HS2. Then there was a re-announcement of the net zero stuff. There was stuff about education, which we all know won't happen on his watch, and a very personal, eccentric anti-smoking proposal, which everyone, I think, can kind of line up behind on preventive medicine grounds. But you've sort of thought, why is this guy coming up with this right now?
Yeah, because that will. There's a certain faction in the Tory party
very
who
much
will just say the hell with that.
Well,
people should be able to do what they want.
Clearly, well-sourced reports in the papers today, Thursday, saying that Liz Truss is furious, and also he's arguing against himself, Sunak, because he himself shelved the ban on 2-for-1 junk food.
That's right.
Why is obesity okay?
So he sort of challenged that, didn't he? He was challenged on the Today programme this morning. We're recording this on Thursday. And Robbo said to him, sorry, a bit over familiar there, to the great Nick Robinson.
That's media talk, folks.
So Nick Robinson said
Nick
Robinson said to him, what's the difference? And he said, well, there is a clear difference. It's like chemically addictive and so on and so forth. But actually, when you look at the two challenges, if you're talking about them as a health challenge, there's no profound difference.
Not at all. And I mean, that's what made me think this is quite arbitrary. It's obviously, smoking is the kind of thing that someone, I'm sure, thinks that smoking is, rather low life and just horrible.
Yeah.
And indeed it is a horrible habit. But somehow watching him on stage saying that, I did wonder, if I was the parent of a child who's not struggling on, the bread line, or I was worrying about how I'm going to pay my fuel bills this winter, and I see a multi-millionaire prime minister, the richest MP in the country, who's been introduced by his billionaire wife, telling me, that there's going to be restrictions on having a crafty burn if you're in your teens, I'm not sure I'd respond that well.
That pissed me off as well. But before we skip over it, is being lectured by the daughter of a billionaire about inspiration and aspiration, and hoping that the whole nation would have the same opportunities that her daughter has. Fiona Miller, education expert and writer for The Guardian and occasionally for the New European, made the point, well, that would be at least 4 times the education budget right now if you came close to giving everybody those opportunities. So this kind of paternalistic, very patronising delivery, I thought, about how I've arrived and my background gives me the credential to solve the UK's problems. I was sitting there thinking, your background eradicates the potential to solve the problems because you haven't got a bloody clue what real life is like.
It's a problem to be solved. It's an exam question for Sunak.
Exactly.
So we read about his addiction to spreadsheets.
Yeah.
Don't try them, kids. They're dangerous.
They should
they're
ban
highly
that.
addictive.
They should ban them from
ban
14-year-olds.
spreadsheets and newsagents. And that, his Treasury officials are sort of overawed by this. But in fact, it tells you a great deal about how he sees everything, which is we're all just data to his, very mechanical economistic mind. We're all just things to be bets to take, funds to be hedged. That's the way he sees the world. He can't help it. That's what he's been doing since he left university. And it shows because, rich people can be good populists. I mean, Trump won a presidential election. He thinks he won too.
Yeah.
His kind of vulgar richness does reach out because Trump is the kind of rich person that impoverished people would like to be.
Yes.
Sunak is a reminder of why people hate the rich when they show off too much with his Bluetooth mug and his heated swimming pool. It just doesn't work. And I think that it will be an issue. That's not necessarily articulated. I don't suppose many voters will go to the polling booths thinking, I'm not going to vote Tory because Rishi Sunak is married to a billionaire heiress.
But they won't connect with him. That's the
because
thing.
He doesn't connect.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is that his whole manner is that he's waiting at the end of every sentence in interviews as well as speeches for an applause line.
I've never heard anybody occupying that position, or even any of the Secretary of State positions, being quite so brittle under moderate interview pressure. The way he snaps back and he can't wait to say his point, and he can't wait to tell you why you're wrong and he's right, and he can't wait to somehow articulate the cleverness of his position and the rightness of his position. And there's an utter absence of humility in him. He's
very much so.
I can't remember who said that he dripped with vanity, but it's absolutely true.
And he's got this new formula, which is essentially, what would you do? Yeah. So after net zero, he said it's for others to say how they would, explain to people they're going to have to pay £5,000, £10,000, £15,000.
That's right.
This mythical number that's been plucked out of the air. Yeah. And in the Today programme interview we've been talking about, he was sharp when challenged on the scrapping of the northern part of HS2 and said, what would these people do about the schemes I've come up with that I'm proposing instead, amounting to 36 billion, he said out the corner of his mouth.
That is the key word, is the I. The constant, you listen to him. There's never this is what we are doing. Nope. This is what my team, this is what the cabinet has decided. It's all the decision I have taken. I am going to do this. I am going to say this. I have decided, and I am going to solve the problem. There's a bit of a messiah complex.
There is, and there's also quite a bit of tension between him and the party.
I can imagine.
They gave him a reasonable reception. In Manchester. But the truth is that there's a lot of anger in the membership of the Tory party that they weren't given a say on his final successful leadership bid. Yeah. And remember, they chose Liz Truss over him in 2022, first time out of the asking. And she was a huge star at the party conference, which tells you so much that is unbelievable, both about her and the party.
Do you think this is an unknowable question, and it's a tough one to ask. No, he keeps saying, I'm the first prime minister from an ethnic minority, and the great thing.
Well, the first because Disraeli,
of course, Jewish. But he makes the point that the greatest thing about that is it's no big deal. And I wonder whether that's true. Actually, I wonder whether within the Conservative Party, is it still a little bit racist? Is there an undercurrent of
more than a little bit racist? Yeah. I mean, there's a kind of brazenness to a lot of the claims we heard in Manchester. When Kemi Badenoch says that Britain is the best country in the world to be a black person, I'm not a black person, so I can't, comment on that. Yeah. But other people of colour have commented and said, "Are you kidding?"
Yeah.
Or it's not as good as being a white person, which is, of course, the correct metric.
Yeah.
Look, the Tory party is still, at minimum, a nativist party. Now, in the old sort of One Nation Tory days, that was very subterranean most of the time. When Enoch Powell gave his Rivers of Blood speech in 1968, he was a member of the Shadow Cabinet and he was sacked immediately.
Yeah.
And that set a sort of barrier beyond which no one in either party, by the way, was felt it was safe to go.
I hadn't appreciated that his ousting then was as immediate and direct consequence of that
he's
speech.
Just got rid of him immediately.
Which shows you, doesn't it, just how things have changed.
Yes.
We think that we have become much more progressive. You've got Suella Braverman saying effectively exactly the same thing, and not only tolerated, but being scared of,
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, Sunak got the leadership because of Suella Braverman. There's no question. On that weird Sunday in October when Boris Johnson was going to try and come back and run for the leadership, it was Suella Braverman's decision on the Sunday to say, I'm for Rishi, that got her job back as Home Secretary and locked her in. I mean, people say she might be moved in the reshuffle. I'd be very surprised because she doesn't quite own Sunak, but she's got a huge amount of power. And also the party like what she's saying, I'm afraid. I mean, all that language, invasion, that it's a existential challenge, she said in the Washington speech that caused so much trouble.
Yeah, the hurricane of
immigration. These are very dangerous.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, everyone of any decency knows that the language you use in this context, in particular, has real world consequences. And we've seen them. We've seen a rise in. It was interesting. Braverman in her speech said she referred to Islamic terrorism, which is still the MI5's annual report confirms it is still the main threat. But she didn't refer to the growing threat from far right terrorism in the UK, which is a serious issue and a growing one. Now, it would be absolutely wrong to say it's directly Suella Braverman's fault that is so. But the problem is you create a permissive environment where it suddenly becomes possible to say the next worst thing.
Yeah.
It's, the Home Secretary is using that kind of language.
Yeah. This brings me to another character flaw, I think, of Sunak, which is that I think he's a coward. And I think when he was pressed this morning on the radio about, do you agree with her words about immigration? You talk about diversity and the dreams of coming to the UK that you both sets of parents, Suella Braverman's parents and Rishi Sunak's parents, held and came to this country and thrived and prospered. And what's the difference between somebody in Tunisia wanting to
or on a boat,
in terms of the dream? What's the difference? And which of you is right, Suella Braverman or you, Rishi Sunak? And he said, well, he wouldn't answer the question, couldn't answer the question. And it's clear that he has a different view. That's patently obvious, I think. But he hasn't got the courage to say, she shouldn't talk like that. It's inflammatory and unhelpful.
I think privately he does.
Yeah.
But I think he's also quite happy for her to be an outlier, saying these things and appealing to the party base. Because, one way of configuring all this, one way of framing it is that Sunak does not want to go down to a disastrous defeat, as John Major did in 97, for example, or Corbyn did in 2019. He doesn't want to be the Corbyn of modern Toryism, and so shoring up the base, which is exactly what a figure like Suella Braverman does, is very much to his advantage. Also, Sunak is a very cynical user of culture wars. I mean, during the leadership contests in 2022, he said often that the only thing he objected to about the Rwanda policy was it wasn't tough enough and he would do more of it.
Yeah.
So, hence in the speech, the line about we'll do whatever it takes to enact that policy, which is code for if I have to, we will leave the European Convention on Human Rights, which is is total catnip to Tory members. Never mind the fact that it's totally morally wrong, but also completely incompatible with the Good Friday Agreement.
Yeah.
But he's throwing out these bits of red meat.
Yeah. And he is prepared to double down on somebody else's badness just to say, hey, look at me, I'm like that. It reminds me a bit bizarrely when we think about that. I don't know if you remember when Rebecca Brooks, or Rebecca Wade as she was at the time, became the editor of the Sun newspaper, and everybody said, oh, this will be the end of the page 3 girls. There won't be any naked boobs in national newspapers now, thank God. We've got a woman at the helm. And on her first day, she came in with a big badge saying, I love page 3.
Double down.
And it's double down on where people think you're negative. The theory goes, well, I'm going to double down on that because that's a small issue. But the bigger issue is I need to seem strong and independent minded. And I think that's what he's obviously trying do, but he can't pull it off because he doesn't look or sound strong.
The politics of racism are complicated too, because it is patronising to suggest that a person of colour is incapable of saying things which will be, harmful to other people of colour.
Yes.
I mean, everyone has free will.
Yeah.
I always thought, much as I disliked intensely her policies, which now seem quite moderate compared to Suella Braverman's, when Priti Patel would say, hang on a minute, that just because of my background doesn't mean that I'm in favour of open borders. Well, that's a fair point.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
But you're still wrong.
Yeah. Talking about the politics of racism, Nigel Farage was floating around conspicuously.
More than floating around, I think. I mean, it was fascinating, the conference in that, because Sunak was not in command and control of this conference at all. I mean, first of all, there was the total disarray over HS2, which quite unnecessarily dominated the whole conference. And the second thing was that there was this kind of carnival sideshows going on everywhere. Liz Truss's Fringe event was a massive hit. Farage was all over the place, doubling up as a GB News anchor host, sort of our Tucker Carlson, but also as a kind of guru. And to the point where when Sunak was asked, would you let Farage back into the party? Given the damage that Farage did to the Tory party in all sorts of ways, you'd have thought the answer is no. Mm. But he said, I welcome back anyone who shares our ideals, which, of course, was an underarm ball to Farage, who was then asked about it, and he was able to sharply decline this offer.
Well, he sort of said, when the Tory party lives up to my ideals, then I'll come back in.
I mean, I think we've said this before, but he is a hugely consequential figure.
Well, also, let's say through gritted teeth as well, acknowledge, because it's important not to underestimate people. He is an enormously talented communicator.
Yes, he understands modern politics a lot better.
I've seen him handle all sorts of people, from Owen Jones to Piers Morgan or whoever in interview, and I've rarely seen anybody get the better of him when it comes to him getting his message across and appealing to who he wants to. And I thought from that point of view, this week, I think he sent so many dog whistles out that the whole place was barking for him.
Yeah, I mean, what he does is he's the one man ginger group. He sort of sets the terrain.
Yeah.
So he did for Brexit, and he's doing it now on net zero. He's been at the net zero thing for years and asked for a referendum on net zero, quite a while ago. And at the time, people said, "Oh, this is ridiculous. What's he on about?" And here we are. What is the first thing that Sunak does as part of his rebranding is he goes soft on net zero. It's a very interesting trajectory from Farage's mouth to Tory policy is a contracting distance.
Yeah.
He's a very, very clever and astute politician, and he understands. You're right. He understands how to deal with people from all backgrounds. I remember when he started to really make an impression. One of the senior Cameroons, this was back in the coalition days, said to me, "Oh Christ, he's like a nationalist Ken Clarke," and that's not a bad way of describing him, because he has that sort of blokish, cigar smoking, likes a tipple thing, affability, and I actually don't think he's particularly pleasant, but I think he's very good at wearing a pleasant face, and he has that sort of TV. The speed with which he's taken to TV presenting is really impressive.
I think he's clearly very clever and very accomplished and very devious little bastard as well. Now, so it does, let's throw things a little bit further forward and ask ourselves like a question that would have seemed absurd 5 years ago. But is it possible, do you think, Farage re-enters the Tory party? That's definitely possible. Gets a safe seat somewhere. That's definitely possible. Enters the shadow cabinet under Keir Starmer Labour government and is seen as the great hope for a resurgent Tory party on the right wing of British politics.
Look,
and even goes on to enter Downing Street.
Since I saw Trump coming down a golden escalator in 2015, I've stopped using the word never.
Yeah.
There are two reasons why that's, if not probable, entirely plausible. The first is that Farage is incredibly nimble. He's had more parties than he's had hot dinners. he moves the air around himself to fit the time, and the need and the message he's trying to. And he has completely understood that the next phase of conservatism is going to be, for want of a better word, MAGA UK. And that's his brand. He invented that. Hence the kind of the way he was almost revered as a guru in Manchester at the Tory conference. So he's chiming with where they're going to be at, assuming they lose. And also, he's still around. He's very powerful. They'll be wanting to eat energy bars, after what may be a drubbing, who knows, but they'll be looking around for things they can do that show that they are fortifying and recuperating and growing. Yeah. So I rule nothing out.
And the other thing I think he's got on his side in terms of that being a possibility is that all the bad stuff's already priced in.
Yes.
There's nothing. It's very hard to imagine there's any more crap going to come out about Farage. We've heard it all. We know what he is. If you like him, you love him for the reasons that you've already articulated, the affability and all the blokishness. If you hate him for the same sort of reasons, the populism and the shenanigans and the devious nature of his communications. But it's already all priced in. It's all out. So if he's there as a candidate, soiled as he is, he might be a better bet for a Tory party to present to the nation a leader than a Suella Braverman or
it's quite possible. And also it would become a lot more feasible if Trump wins next November.
Exactly right.
Because he's genuinely, in with Trump.
Exactly right.
And in with Steve Bannon, Trump's former chief strategist, who's not quite as influential with Trump anymore, but he is absolutely crucial to this sort of global network. And I think that Farage he's like a facehugger in Alien. He leaps on movements and makes them his own. So could he do that to a defeated Tory party? It's entirely possible. And now, if you asked the current cabinet if that was possible, they'd all deny it strongly and say it was an outrage. He's just a jester. Not going to happen. Yeah. But if politics since Trump and Brexit has taught us one thing, it's that it is very foolish to rule out something that just looks like it has a whisper of possibility about it. Yeah. It's all to do with taking an opportunity, and certainly the Tory party after an election defeat, and it's already acting, by the way, as if it's been defeated.
That's right.
This was like an opposition conference.
That's right.
Will be very, very vulnerable to that sort of attack by a viral entity, if you like.
I read somebody talking about the big problem the Labour Party had in the time of militant, when I was growing up in Liverpool especially, was this entryism.
Yes.
And now, of course, and with Corbyn, of course, that was the accusation that they facilitated entryism, much harder left spectrum. But it seems like it's a Tory party problem now that there's an entryist prospect from a far right candidate.
Yes, and I think also that one thing Boris Johnson did in 2019 before he won the general election was he purged all of the old One Nation moderate Tories. They've all gone.
Yeah.
So, with a couple of exceptions. But I mean, it really is a party that is now in Farage's image. It's almost like he doesn't even doesn't even have to be entryist. Yeah. Because he's no longer.
It's like the Tories have entered Farage.
Right. They've gone to him.
Yeah.
And I did think it was just so interesting that horrific, scour your eyes with Dettol image of him disco dancing with Priti Patel to I Can't Take My Eyes Off of You. That was a moment. It was a moment because they had a former Home Secretary who harbours leadership ambitions herself, dancing derangedly with Farage. And everyone's having a great time.
Where was Penny Mordaunt with her bloody big sword at that time when we could have used it?
Yes, and, poor Penny Mordaunt, she gave a slightly strange speech.
It was slightly overdone, wasn't it?
It was a bit. It was a bit Henry V.
It wasn't just slightly overdone. It was hammed up beyond all. It was like hammed up like a pig farm.
Al Pacino in Any Given Sunday, I mean, it's interesting because I think that bad contexts make for bad decisions.
Yeah.
And I wasn't there, thank God. Yeah. But looking from a safe distance in the metaphorical bunker, you could kind of sense a kind of air of collective lunacy descending upon the party, which often happens before a party loses power in a big way.
It reminded me of a bit of a kid's fancy dress party where everybody playing a part, like she was doing a sort of sixth form Amdram thing and had got it hopelessly wrong. Liz was doing her I'm going to be a debating queen, and he was doing his kind of sixth form dissertation on why politics must change. Where are the bloody adults?
Physics revision notes
exactly.
out. Exactly. No one ask any questions until I say so.
Exactly.
Otherwise you'll get more milk.
Yes. Well, on that bombshell, we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to return with, I think, what will be one of the most consequential questions of our lifetimes.
Of our times.
So this week's podcast, as ever, is sponsored by The New European, which, if you don't know, is a weekly newspaper which was launched very quickly after Brexit, very much anti-Brexit, and it's an actual newspaper and also a fantastic website. And we are one of the fastest growing media titles in Europe, which is wonderful news, not least in part because of the talent we've got, including Matt D'Ancona. So if you enjoy what you're listening to, Matt puts that down in actual words each week, which is a fabulous.
And if you don't, there are plenty of other people who are really good.
Alistair Campbell's weekly diary, which is always entertaining. We've got fantastic Bonnie Greer, Tanit Koch from Germany, Patience. Will Self writes
James Ball.
There's a ton of great cultural content as well. So if you're into the idea of Europe being a cultural entity, then we serve that as well with stuff that you won't read elsewhere. Great exhibitions in Hamburg or museums to go and visit when you're next in Prague, etc., etc., etc. So if you're a Europhile, I promise you're going to love it. And this week, I'm going to give every single new subscriber a special burgundy-coloured Bollocks to Brexit passport cover, which, trust me, are fantastic fun and look great at any border control you happen to be stuck at.
And break the ice at parties as well.
Definitely breaks the ice at parties. And you can subscribe from just £1 a week. So for £1 a week, you get the entire digital offering on our great website, and that's 7 years of archive as well. Or if, like me, you like to get your actual hands on the newspaper each week and get that delivered through your door, you can get that for just an extra £1 a week, and that's a 75% saving on the price at the newsstand. So do something positive about correcting the corrosive nationalism of UK media and become a New European subscriber. Just visit theneweuropean.co.uk/2Matts. That's the number 2, MATTS. Enjoy. So, Matt, only one real question has shaken me to my core this week.
Well, Sunak is preamble to the big discussion, which when you sent it to me, I thought this is amazing.
Yeah.
But then I haven't been able to stop thinking about it ever since, when I've been meant to be thinking about, Tory policies.
I'm exactly in the same place, and I haven't reached a conclusion.
No, I think we need to kick it about a bit. So should we go to this is Donald Trump talking at a rally, I believe, in Iowa.
Yeah.
About a very unexpected issue. Should we play the clip?
Let's play the clip. Just to put it into context, he's described, I think it's because he was talking about electric boats, wasn't he, for some reason? And he's got it into his head that if a boat sinks and it's got an electric motor, everyone gets electrocuted. Yeah, but what range, I'm not quite sure.
It reminds me of one of my favourite stand-up comedians, Jim Jeffries, said in the run-up to the 2016 election. The thing about Donald Trump is he's a lot of fun, right? And at moments like this, it's hard to disagree, because he obviously is a terrible man facing 91 criminal charges and so on. But what came into his head to think that on the campaign trail, it would be good to raise this question? And first of all, you go, what an idiot. But then you find yourself lying awake at night thinking, do I want to be eaten by a shark or electrocuted? And
also, I mean, it becomes quite profound, doesn't it? Because, is a quick death in itself better than being eaten by a shark? Because I did think that if you went for shark, right?
Yes.
But you survived it, you would never have to buy a drink in town ever again.
There's that. However, so I looked into, because we always offer listeners data.
There's data.
Only 9 shark-related fatalities in 2022.
Really? But how many death by boat power motor electrocution? None, I'll bet.
None. I mean, I don't have data on. But the traumatic fact is that sharks don't attack human beings on purpose because we're too bony.
Right.
So, never mind Jaws.
Okay.
And Quint, and we're going to need a bigger podcast, right?
Oh, no.
They do it by mistake.
Okay.
Unless you attack them, obviously, which is different. But the problem is, what happens if they take a bite and go, yuck.
Right.
I want a sea lion or a seal or, and then you go off and bleed to death, which is not nice.
I see.
Or you die of sepsis or sepsis.
Unless you can do what everyone tells you to do when you meet a great white shark in the ocean, which is to apparently punch it on the nose.
Yes, I've
always been a bit dodgy about that.
I've always thought that probably punching a bloody big shark on the nose is suboptimal. But what do I know?
You've never tried punching anything underwater. It's got all the force of a wet lettuce, hasn't it? By the time you get to
I have swum with sharks, and it is very wonderful.
Not with great whites, sure.
No.
What, in a cage?
No, in with scuba diving and everything.
Really?
Yeah, and it's oddly serene because they don't they leave you alone if you leave them alone.
Yeah.
And I've done it twice, and it's and I'm not by any means a sort of dangerous sports person.
So what would you then go for shark on the basis of that?
No, I mean I'm still tending towards electrocution.
Right.
Okay, but having taken a straw poll, I'm not sure I'm right because electrocution is extremely unpleasant and can take many, many, many minutes. And the idea that it's painless seems to me to be somewhat, old Sparky doesn't hurt, seems to be somewhat belied by the evidence, right?
Wouldn't the electricity spread out through the ocean?
Well, if it was in the water, I mean, we're talking about
not like
here
being
about
in a bath, is it?
No, I mean, if we're talking about the electric chair,
we need
then
a scientist. We
need Brian Cox.
Brian, if you're listening,
think about books is they're dead big. The only metric I can find on this is that so horrible is in death by injection, which is the principal use of means of execution.
Have we now morphed onto capital punishment?
Well, I don't want to get into the sort of cruel and unusual thing, but what interested me was that electrocution is coming back a bit in the States because
back in fashion.
It's very 2023, right? Because there have been so many botched chemical executions, and the punters,
because they ran out of chemicals, didn't they? And they
and they're always people, and apparently it's been established beyond some doubt that it is far from painless. It's very, it's like being waterboarded to death. So you get to choose. I didn't know this. In a lot of states, you get to choose. Wow. Okay, so in Alabama, Florida, South Carolina, Kentucky, and Tennessee, they say, "What do you fancy, Matt?"
And what would you go? Would you go for electrocution?
I'd still go for chemical because I can't believe it's.
I'm scared of needles though, so I would go for electrocution.
That would be the last of your worries, believe me.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to sharks.
Just before we leave electrocution, the greatest line of the guy, and it's true. This about a fella. I think it was Andrew French, being taken off to be electrocuted, and as the sort of curtain was opened and all the reporters were there, his last words were, "Guys," to the reporters. He said, "Guys, I've got your headline: French fries."
That is very good.
Yeah, it's good.
That's grace under pressure.
And then he fried, And
then he did fry, which you do, and your head steams and your eyeballs pop out. So it's not very nice. But
so anybody still listening,
anyone who's thinks they've turned on to executioners are us, right? They haven't. This is the two Matts. We're still talking about current affairs. But I think the difference between this podcast and others is that we do wrestle with the difficult philosophical questions. So I was still troubled by this. So I thought, right, I'm going to go to ChatGPT and find out what our future cyberlords have to say. And lo and behold, ChatGPT was a bit narky with me. So I said, what is the least painful form of execution?
You're right.
ChatGPT comes back dead like HAL 9000 in 2001. Says, I'm very sorry, but I can't assist with that question.
What?
Ooh, right?
Imagine if you're on death row and you're turning for guidance.
So I thought, well, I'll try and rephrase it. So I said, would it hurt more to be eaten by shark or electrocuted? And I thought, I wonder if ChatGPT will bite, and it did.
Yeah.
So here we go. Imagine this coming from, the depths of artificial intelligence, right? Both being eaten by a shark and being electrocuted are extremely painful. Brackets, do you think, right? And potentially fatal experiences. Yeah. That's so clever. That, it's difficult to compare the two in terms of pain, as they are very different types of trauma. Yet, thanks.
Especially as I'm a computer.
In our computer. In either case, this is my favourite bit. In either case, it's best to focus on safety and avoid situations that could lead to such outcomes. And this is the absolute killer. If you have concerns about your safety or the safety of others, please seek help and guidance from appropriate authorities. So that's what AI, which is apparently going to take over the world.
Well, Trump was right then in that
He
case,
was right.
wasn't he? Because he was saying, I just wouldn't get in the bloody boat because it's going to go down and everybody's going to get electrocuted. That's obvious.
Correct, but also I'm slightly less worried about AI now than I was a week ago.
Is there a serious element to this conversation, which is...
Really?
I think there might be. I was trying to dig for one. Isn't this part of his... Again, we talked about Farage's affability.
Yes.
But his ability to play off the cuff, to ramble, to do a stand-up set effectively in front of thousands of people.
Yes.
And just throw a bit of politics in. Just to keep the narrative moving.
No one in a bar in Michigan is talking about the Build Back Better Act. Or
That's right.
But they'll have seen Crazy Trump on TV, some of them.
Yeah.
And said, did you hear what he did this time? Shark Electric. And 2 hours later, with the Miller, glass wreckage in front of them, they're still talking, Dwight, you're talking BS, it would be a lot better.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because let's call it a sense of humour. Let's credit him and say he's got a sense of humour and he can make people laugh from time to time, for better or worse. You look at our current crop of politicians.
Yes.
Both humourless buggers, both of them.
Yeah, I don't think either of them are going to win the, Perrier Award.
I mean,
neither Festival, honestly,
are they? Neither of them could get a laugh.
And also,
out of
I think that both of them are worse than that, which is they're both earnest.
Yes.
And modern politics does not smile upon earnestness. You can be serious, but you can't be earnest. And both of them sort of have this, right, everyone calm down because we're going to be serious now, which is just a killer. Yeah. If you're trying to reach out, even if what you're saying is something extremely serious about, I get that you're struggling, I get that you're suffering. This will be Starmer's challenge in Liverpool at their conference will be, can he connect with the way in which people are genuinely still feeling terrible about all sorts of things? Yeah. It's a big ask for him because that is not his... That's not his MO. He's an administrator. He ran the CPS. He was director of public prosecutions. He believes in rule-making, rationality, law-making, all that, which is, of course, all good stuff. Yeah. But it isn't enough anymore.
And I wonder whether, and maybe I'm reaching too far here, but I wonder whether in 2024, we had a chat the other day about the new European and what a huge year 2024 is going to be, because it is...
Who's going to win the Russian presidential elections, for example?
Well, that's the biggest question.
It's a question on my mind.
It could go either way. Putin or Putin. But it's going to be an enormous year. And I wonder whether people's thirst for entertainment somehow influences their thirst for proper government as well. And they want to be governed by entertaining people.
Yes. I mean, there's a fantastic book that was written in 1975, I think, by a guy now dead called Neil Postman, called Amusing Ourselves to Death. And he was really looking at TV, pre-internet. But he said the problem is that what's going to happen is that politics is going to become a branch of the entertainment industry. And it reads so prophetically now.
When was that written?
75.
Oh, wow.
It's amazing, isn't it? And that you have a situation where Trump is talking about sharks versus electrocution. Yeah. And Holly Willoughby is addressing the nation as if she was a Secretary of State. That's talking about the resignation of Phil. Yeah. Are you okay? I mean, the kind of role swapping.
It's all merged.
Everyone says, oh, it's just like Reagan. No, it's not, because Reagan and Schwarzenegger were Hollywood figures who became politicians, successfully so. Yeah. But these are people who are actually entertainers. Farage and Trump and Bolsonaro, by the way, and
Johnson as well.
And Johnson, they are showbiz. Yeah. That's what they do. And it says nothing good about the state of democracy that's proved now to be a very reliable way of winning. Yeah. Because entertaining yourself into power is a dangerous route.
But that opens up, and we haven't got time to discuss it now, but that opens up so many questions about our political system.
Yes.
Which is that if people are allowed to vote for the most entertaining guy on the block, and that becomes the way we kind of self-regulate, because our need to have a laugh is greater than our need to be secure and safe and and have a good economy and all of these important things, you'd end up with something like Brexit, wouldn't you?
Yes, exactly. And we did. And, and might worse. I mean, it's interesting because after we had Michael Wolff on the program last week to talk about...
Very well worth a listen if you haven't listened already.
Check it out, because he's talking about his new book on Murdoch, but also about Trump and everything. I called someone I know in Washington who's a never-Trumper. And this person said, apropos of what we've been talking about, that the problem America has now is that none of the founding fathers, as this person put it, were jokers, which is none of the founding fathers wrote the Constitution 1784. I mean, they foresaw many, many, many problems. There's genius in that document.
Yeah.
But the one thing they didn't foresee was that television and now digital technology would turn statesmanship into pure performance.
Yes.
And you have to ask, it's so vulnerable. This isn't just the American Constitution, by the way. It's all political systems are now so vulnerable to this form of assault. And trust in politics is so low that it makes it even more dangerous, because people think, well, politics doesn't amount to anything. It's not going to improve my life. So let's go with the guy who makes me feel good, or who I might want to have round, or I might conceivably have a chat with, which is a very, very, actually a very poor test of statesmanship. But it is at the moment increasingly the test.
And I guess the last one here that you could point to who had a bit of both, I suppose you would say definitely Blair, maybe Cameron a touch.
A little bit, yeah.
But since we've had either clown or kind of straight man
and
buffoon.
The paradox is that Boris Johnson did more damage to the British political system through Brexit and then Partygate than anyone in recent memory. But he also, because that adds to the rust already sitting on the political system and diminishes trust, it makes the system more vulnerable to people like him rather than less. I don't know if you saw the Channel 4 programme on Partygate this week.
I haven't yet, but I'm told it's brilliant.
It's brilliant, and it's sickening. Yeah. I mean, I really do recommend it to people, because it's a docudrama, well dramatized. It takes some liberties, but not many, and interspersed with interviews with real people who did suffer, indignities and huge fines in contrast to the politicians. And you think, what were they thinking? Yeah. It really is one of those. I always feel with COVID that there's a tendency to sort of forget about what happened and turn away from it. But it's good that the inquiry is now up and running. It's good that we have these things that remind us of the liberties that they took.
It's good as long as something changes.
Well, that's the big question.
Change. Maybe Rishi can change that.
I mean, I think in COVID, Rishi Sunak actually drew exactly the wrong conclusions, which is that instead of thinking, right, so now actually the state is going to have to do a lot more than it used to. There he was with the furlough, which was the one successful bit of the whole government COVID suite of policies. He hated it. Hated lockdown, and came out of it thinking, right, we've got to stop this. It's time to contract the state, draw back, get out of people's lives. Well, that's not the series of problems that are facing the nation now. Didn't have anything to say about social care. Unbelievable.
Incredible. All right. Well, not the last time I'm sure we'll express
absolutely
about this government. What didn't we have time to talk about this week?
Well, I've been moonlighting, having fun at the London Film Festival.
Oh, yeah.
Which
wonderful.
is terrific. And one of the things I love most, and, there's nothing, if you're a movie nut, there's nothing more fun than, if you're not a movie nut, it must seem completely deranged, but sort of queuing at 8 a.m. to go to a screening.
What's the highlight so far?
So far, I would say it's between the movie I saw this morning, actually, which is David Fincher's new movie, The Killer, with Michael Fassbender coming back as an assassin. Very cool, very good. Smith's soundtrack, very, very interesting. And Sofia Coppola's Priscilla about Elvis Presley.
Fantastic.
Also, Emerald Fennell's new movie, Saltchurch.
I saw a good film in much less kind of austere company on Netflix called Reptile. Have you seen that yet?
Very good.
I
watched that on my recommendation.
I thought it was a great old-fashioned kind of thriller, cop thriller.
Really excellent.
Brilliant performance from him.
First rate.
Amazing screenplay and loads of great architectural shots, which always turn me on. Yeah.
It just, really, really excellent.
The other thing we haven't touched on is GB News.
Well,
meltdown in GB
the
News.
meltdown at GB News is extraordinary, and I suppose reflects a problem, which is it's like it's a baby version of the crisis that Fox News has been through.
Yeah.
Which is how far is too far.
Yeah.
So they sacked Lawrence Fox.
Hooray!
Which, I think they had to after the disgusting things he said about very good journalist Ava Evans. They sacked Calvin Robinson.
Which again, hooray! But I can't quite work out why they sacked him.
Well, I think he went on social media and said, hands off Loza.
Right. Okay. Right.
Then the plot thickens because the cops go around to arrest Loza because of his alleged ulez.
So I've got a point on this, which is if they've gone round and raided Lawrence Fox's house,
yes,
and I've got no time for Lawrence Fox.
You'd have to have a heart of stone not to laugh, wouldn't you?
Tosser, right? But if they've gone round and done that for inciting criminal damage against ULEZ cameras, why have they not raided Ian Duncan Smith's house?
It's
because
interesting,
he did exactly the same thing. He said, if people vandalise those cameras, I'm on their side because they've been lied to.
Again, the gap closes, doesn't it? We think that GB News is out at the fringes and that people like Lawrence Fox are out at the fringes, and indeed they are. But there's someone who's a former Conservative leader saying
promoting criminal damage,
the same, and it's not a crime when we do it.
Or if you're sort of posh and respectable, it's not a crime. But if you're a sort of grubby weirdo on the fringes of media who's got an arsey reputation, then you can go and 5 coppers. I counted in the video that I saw 5 coppers raiding his house.
I mean, he will reinvent himself as a sort of thespian Alex Jones, won't he? He'll have a sort of ghastly InfoWars version. I mean, he does. I mean, he's terrible and dreadful in every way and misguided and wrong, but he does have that kind of actor's energy. Yeah. He'll disregard this as he's been rejected in the casting call, right? Yeah. And he'll come back with, because it is so.
A crowdfund
the means of production are almost zero cost now for the kind of thing he does. So he'll be back on YouTube or Rumble or something like that. And they love being. I mean, they feed off persecution. These people, in the same way that Russell Brand is, in his own way, feeding off what's happening to him. Yeah, and they're all piling in, saying, "Well, makes you think, conspiracies and all that." It's a very the sort of rules of the modern political game are very different.
I won't go into this in detail, but there's a great podcast called Philosophize This. I don't know if
I have heard it in the past,
and by an American student of philosophy. It's brilliant. So if you're looking for something a little bit even deeper than the two Matts in terms of philosophy, this is a great.
And that's hard.
But the most recent one is about, and it's a fabulous episode, all about how our thirst for narrative is what's driving this constant news cycle that is so fast that none of us can pay attention to what is really happening, which is the bigger picture. And everything moves so quickly now that the bigger narrative about the fact that we've had 13 years of crap government and all of this, people don't latch onto it because it's all just bite.
It's like episodes of soap opera. Yeah. Little bits of nuggets of story. And it's very difficult because politicians talk about narrative all the time. But you're right. I mean, narrative can be lots of things. It can be the future of the nation, or it can be Donald Trump talking about sharks. Yeah. I mean, that is a different world in which we now live.
Yeah. Well, listen, let's make it part of the two Matts mission where appropriate to try and take that bigger macro view of what's going on.
The big story. Yeah. I mean, it's very hard to keep your eyes on the big story now.
Yeah. So, folks, as a quick reminder, we are going to, from next week, do a fantastic second episode each week, which will be a sort of Q&A where we answer any questions you send in. And the email address to send in your questions to the two Matts is 2Matts, that's the number 2, MATTS, at tnepublishing.co.uk. 2Matts at tnepublishing.co.uk. And thank you so much for all of those questions we've already had, and look forward to seeing what else you want to ask. Ask anything. A quick reminder of our special deal for all new subscribers to the fantastic New European, where you can read the great Matt D'Ancona every week and a plethora of star talent as well. Go to theneweuropean.co.uk /2Matts. That's the number 2 MATTS. and there's a link in the show notes. And every single new subscriber, will get one of our wonderful burgundy-coloured Bollocks to Brexit passport covers, which you can display with pride next time you're at a border queue. Thanks as ever to our producers, the third Matt Hill at Rethink Audio, and also Ollie. Thank you so much, Ollie.
Ollie, you're going to have to change your name.
Yeah, and until next week, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
Goodbye.